Gabriel Hart had his life perfectly orchestrated until one fleeting moment unraveled it all. What he witnessed that day left him stunned, but the truth behind it would rewrite everything he thought he knew. Stick around until the end for a twist that'll catch you off guard. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Gabriel moved through the sweeping halls of his sprawling estate with the same precision that governed every corner of his world. His days were a masterpiece of structure, his thriving business empire bent to his will, his household hummed like clockwork, and surprises were simply not tolerated. That's why, as he passed the towering glass windows overlooking the manicured gardens, what he saw stopped him cold. His 12-year-old son, Matteo, was dancing. But he wasn't alone. Beside him was Sophia, the family's cook, a woman Gabriel had barely registered since she'd started working for them 6 months earlier. The scene was so jarring that Gabriel blinked hard, half convinced his eyes were deceiving him. Yet there they were, gliding across the grass in perfect harmony. Matteo's steps were clumsy, uncertain, but alive with a focus Gabriel hadn't seen in years. The boy stumbled more than once, but instead of frustration, a bright, unrestrained laugh spilled out, a sound Gabriel hadn't heard since Matteo's mother passed. Ever since that loss, Matteo had retreated into himself, a quiet shadow locked in his own world. And now, here he was, smiling, because of her. Sophia moved with a grace Gabriel wouldn't have dreamed a cook could possess. Every step, every gesture was sharp and intentional, not the playful improvisation of a novice, but the polished skill of someone trained in the art of motion. She wasn't just humoring Matteo, she was teaching him. A chill crept through Gabriel's chest. He didn't like this, not the idea that someone else, especially a mere employee, held sway over his son. The longer he watched, the more his unease hardened into irritation. With a rigid stride, he marched outside, his polished shoes clicking sharply against the stone path. As he approached, Matteo and Sophia noticed him. The boy froze, his earlier joy draining into nervous tension. Sophia, though, stayed calm, wiping her hands on her apron before meeting Gabriel's gaze head-on. "What's going on here?" Gabriel's voice was icy, measured. Matteo dropped his head, but Sophia didn't flinch. "We were practicing, sir," she said simply. "Practicing what, exactly?" "Your son wanted to learn how to dance." Gabriel's eyes shifted to Matteo. "Since when?" The boy shuffled his feet, hesitating. "For a while now," he mumbled. A pang of guilt stabbed at Gabriel. He hadn't noticed. He hadn't even thought to ask. "And why didn't you tell me?" Matteo shrugged faintly, but before he could reply, Sophia cut in. "Because he had no one to practice with." Gabriel's gaze narrowed. There was a quiet strength in her tone, unyielding, almost defiant. It grated on him. "This isn't your job," he said flatly. "No, it isn't," Sophia agreed. "Then why are you doing it?" She crossed her arms, her expression steady. "Because he asked me to." Gabriel turned to Matteo. "Is that true?" The boy nodded. A heavy silence stretched between them. Gabriel exhaled slowly, irritation gnawing at him. He couldn't pinpoint why this bothered him so much, but something about it felt off, like a puzzle piece he couldn't place. And that was unacceptable. His eyes flicked back to Sophia. "I need to speak with you." "Alone?" Matteo glanced between them, worry creasing his brow. Sophia, unfazed, nodded. "As you wish, sir." Gabriel turned abruptly and strode back into the house, not waiting for her to follow. But as he stepped inside, he stole a glance over his shoulder. Matteo leaned towards Sophia, whispering something. She replied softly, her face unreadable, and the boy flashed a small, secretive smile. A shiver ran down Gabriel's spine. There was more to this, something he wasn't seeing. And he intended to find out what. Later, in the dim light of his office, Gabriel sat with his fingers steepled under his chin, staring at his computer screen. The information was ordinary yet unsettling. Sophia Mendez, 29, hired as a cook 6 months ago. No criminal record, no red flags, nothing out of the ordinary. By all accounts, she was exactly what she appeared to be, a diligent employee who kept to herself. And yet, Gabriel's gut churned. There was something beneath the surface, something hidden. His instincts had built him an empire by sniffing out the unseen, and now they screamed that Sophia was more than just a cook. He typed her name into a broader search, adding a word that had lingered in his mind since he'd seen her move. Sophia Mendez ballerina. At first, nothing. Then, buried deep in the results, he found it, a news article from 7 years ago. Gabriel leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the headline. Young ballet prodigy vanishes from spotlight without a trace. His pulse quickened as he clicked the link. A photo loaded. A younger Sophia, poised in a pristine white ballet costume on a grand stage, arms arched in flawless form. Her expression was serene, commanding, nothing like the reserved woman scrubbing pots in his kitchen. The article chronicled a rising star, a dancer with a rare, breathtaking talent, celebrated in prestigious theaters, poised for global fame. Then, abruptly, she was gone. No scandal, no explanation, just silence. Gabriel leaned back, exhaling sharply. Why would someone with that kind of gift abandon it all? And how had she ended up here, cooking in his house? The questions piled up, and he knew the answers wouldn't come from a screen. Standing abruptly, he marched to the kitchen. Sophia was there, as expected, wiping down the counters with methodical care. She looked up as he entered, her face neutral but wary. "Sir," she said, setting down a dish towel. Gabriel didn't mince words. He placed his phone on the counter, the article glowing on the screen. "Care to explain this?" For the first time, a flicker of surprise crossed her face, brief, but real. She glanced at the screen, then back at him. "You've been digging into me," she said, her voice calm but guarded. "I don't like unknowns in my home." Sophia sighed, setting the towel aside. For a moment, he thought she'd stonewall him. Then, after a long pause, she spoke. "I guess I should have seen this coming. You're not the type to let things slide." Gabriel waited, silent. She studied the article, her fingers brushing the counter's edge. "I was a dancer," she admitted. "A long time ago." "You were more than that," Gabriel corrected. "You were exceptional." A faint, bitter smile tugged at her lips. A star that faded before it could burn bright. "Why did you walk away?" She hesitated, conflict flickering in her eyes. Finally, she exhaled. "Because I lost everything." Her voice softened, raw in a way he hadn't expected. He didn't press, just let her continue. "When I was 22, dance was my life," she said. "It was all I knew, all I wanted. I trained relentlessly, pushed myself past every limit, because I thought I was destined for something extraordinary. And I wasn't alone." Gabriel's brow furrowed. "Who?" "My fiancé," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Lucas. He was a dancer too. We'd trained together since we were kids, dreamed of taking on the world together. We'd just landed an international tour, the kind of break we'd spend our lives chasing." Her tone shifted, and Gabriel braced himself. He could sense the turn coming. "The day before our biggest show, Lucas was hit by a car," she said, her gaze distant, lost in the memory. "He died on impact." The words hung heavy between them. Gabriel stayed quiet, letting the weight settle. "After that, I couldn't dance," she continued. "I couldn't even hear music without feeling like part of me had been torn out. Everything I'd built my life around was gone. So I left it all behind." Gabriel absorbed her story. He'd expected tragedy, but not this, not a wound so deep it had erased who she'd been. "So you became a cook," he said, his tone gentler than before. Sophia let out a soft, humorless laugh. "I needed something far from dance. Something steady. Safe. And now," he met her eyes. "Now you're teaching my son." The words landed harder than he'd intended. She didn't flinch, but something shifted in her expression. "Now I teach Mateo," she confirmed. "Why?" Gabriel pressed. "What made you break your own rules for him?" She paused, then said, "Because he reminds me of myself at his age." Gabriel stiffened. "How?" Her face softened. "Because he doesn't smile, sir." The words hit like a punch. Gabriel's jaw tightened, but he couldn't argue. Mateo had been fading since his mother's death, burying himself in books and routines. Gabriel had thought stability was enough, but Sophia had seen what he'd missed. "He smiles when he dances," she added. "I think he just needed someone to hear him." Gabriel swallowed hard, turning away for a moment. He'd spent years ensuring Mateo had everything, except, maybe, the one thing that mattered most. After a beat, he exhaled. "And what's your plan now?" Sophia tilted her head. "You mean, will I push him to dance like it's some cure-all?" "No. I just want him to feel something again. The rest is up to him." Gabriel let that sink in. He'd always prided himself on control, on knowing every detail of his domain. Yet he'd been blind to his own son's quiet struggle. When he spoke again, his voice was low. "I don't like people meddling in my family." Sophia didn't blink. "And I don't like seeing kids who've forgotten how to be kids." The silence thickened. Gabriel had no comeback, because deep down, he knew she was right. Days later, Mateo stood before his father in the grand dining room, fist clenched as he summoned his courage. The chandeliers cast a warm glow over the long table, but the air crackled with tension. Gabriel sat at the head, his face unreadable, watching his son shift nervously. Finally, Mateo took a deep breath. "I want to compete in a dance tournament." The silence was suffocating. Gabriel set his silverware down with deliberate care, his sharp gaze locking onto Mateo. "A dance tournament," he repeated, testing the words. Mateo nodded, standing firm. "Yes, I want to compete." Gabriel leaned back. "When did you decide this?" "Just a while ago," Mateo said, pausing only a heartbeat. "I've been training with Sophia. She thinks I'm ready." Gabriel's eyes flickered at her name, but his tone stayed even. Does she? Yes, Mateo said, unflinching. And I think I am too. Gabriel studied his son, really looked at him, and saw something new, a spark, a resolve that wasn't just childish whimsy. But it didn't ease the knot in his chest. You know this isn't a game, Mateo. Competitions mean discipline, pressure, expectations. I know, Mateo said, straightening. I'm ready for that. Gabriel held his gaze for a long moment, then sighed. Fine. But if you're doing this, you do it right. No half effort. You commit. Mateo's face broke into a grin, wide, unguarded, and so rare it caught Gabriel off guard. Thank you, Dad. That evening, Gabriel found Sophia in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with the precision of someone used to order. She glanced up, sensing his purpose. You knew he'd ask me, Gabriel said, crossing his arms. I suspected, she replied, wiping her hands on a towel before facing him. You think he's ready? She tilted her head slightly. He's got the passion and the drive. The discipline will come. Gabriel exhaled, fingers tapping the counter. If he does this, he'll face failure. Rejection. He might not handle it. Sophia studied him, then said, or maybe you're the one not ready to handle it. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he said, if we're doing this, it's done properly. You train him for real, no coddling. He needs to be pushed. A faint smile curved her lips. I wasn't planning on going easy. The next morning, training began in earnest. Gabriel watched from the sidelines as Sophia shed her quiet cook persona, becoming a focused, no-nonsense minner. Mateo moved through drills with grit, sweat beading on his forehead as Sophia corrected his stance, his steps, his timing. Again, she commanded, her voice firm but fair. You're off the beat. Mateo wiped his brow and started over. Gabriel, leaning against the doorway, saw the change in his son. The boy who'd once been timid, a follower, now had a stubborn streak, a refusal to quit, even when the steps didn't come easy. Hours later, Mateo collapsed on the floor, breathless. Sophia handed him a water bottle. You did well today, she said simply. Mateo grinned up at her. That means a lot coming from you. Gabriel watched in silence, a strange unease stirring. It wasn't jealousy, not anymore. It was something deeper, something he couldn't name. As the tournament neared, training grew brutal. Mateo pushed himself late into the night, perfecting routines until his legs shook. The playful joy of dancing had morphed into fierce determination. Gabriel, despite his doubts, found himself at every session, watching his son transform. One evening, after an exhausting practice, Mateo sat at the dining table, barely touching his food. Gabriel noticed his leg bouncing under the table, nerves spilling over. What's on your mind? Gabriel asked, his tone softer than usual. Mateo hesitated. There's this dancer in the tournament, Diego Alvarez. He's won 2 years running. Gabriel nodded. And? Mateo bit his lip. He messaged me. Said I don't stand a chance. Gabriel's grip tightened on his glass. And what do you think? I don't know, Mateo admitted. Gabriel leaned forward. Listen to me. People only try to tear you down when they're scared of you. If Diego's bothering to message you, he's already nervous. Mateo's eyes widened slightly, his posture lifting. You think so? I know so, Gabriel said. For the first time in that conversation, Mateo smiled, a small, real smile. Then I'll just have to prove him wrong. Gabriel watched his son, a flicker of admiration breaking through his usual reserve. Mateo wasn't the same kid who'd hidden behind books. He was becoming something tougher, something more. And for the first time, Gabriel was eager to see where this would lead. The theater buzzed with anticipation. Backstage, dancers stretched, practiced, and steadied their nerves. Music hummed faintly, blending with the whispers of coaches and the rhythm of anxious breaths. Mateo stood among them, adjusting his dance shoes, hands trembling slightly. Gabriel watched from a distance, his face a mask. Control had always been his domain, but today, it was out of his hands. His son was stepping into the spotlight alone, and there was nothing he could do but watch. Sophia stood beside Mateo, resting a calm hand on his shoulder. Breathe, she said. Mateo exhaled slowly, nodding. You've done the work. Now just dance. Gabriel observed them, noting the easy trust between them. It made him feel like an outsider in his own son's world. Sophia had given Mateo something he hadn't, a confidence born of passion, not duty. He clenched his jaw, shoving the thought aside. This wasn't the moment for introspection. The announcer's voice boomed. Next, we welcome Mateo Hart to the stage. Mateo swallowed hard, glancing at his father. Gabriel gave a single, firm nod. Go. Mateo stepped out, the light searing, the audience's silence pressing in. He took his place at the center, heart pounding. Doubt flickered. What if he forgot the steps? What if Diego was right? Then he spotted them in the front row. His father, watching with an intensity that held no judgment, just presence, Sophia, offering a subtle nod. The music started. Matteo let go. His first step was crisp, the next seamless. The rhythm carried him, each move flowing into the next. The stage became his universe, the pressure dissolving. He wasn't here to win. He was here to dance. The final sequence loomed, the trickiest part, a spin and leap he'd stumbled over for weeks. He braced himself, launched off the floor, and for a split second, time hung still. Then he landed, light, steady. The music stopped. Silence. Then applause thundered through the room. Matteo stood, chest heaving, scanning the crowd. His father was on his feet, clapping. Sophia, too, her eyes bright with pride. The results came quickly. The winner of this year's competition is Diego Alvarez. The crowd roared as Diego stepped up, smirking confidently. Matteo kept his face steady, swallowing the sting of defeat. But before he could dwell on it, the announcer continued, "We're also presenting a special award for artistic expression, recognizing passion, connection, and heart. This goes to Matteo Hart." The audience erupted again. Matteo blinked, stunned, as his name rang out. He stepped forward, accepting the medal draped around his neck. It wasn't first place, but his father's expression, a quiet, unshakable pride, said more than any trophy could. Later, in the dressing room, Diego sauntered over as Matteo unlaced his shoes. "Not bad," he said, twirling his trophy. "You might be decent next year." Matteo smiled faintly. "Next year, I'm winning." Diego smirked. "We'll see." Outside, Gabriel and Sophia waited. When Matteo emerged, Gabriel rested a hand on his shoulder. "How do you feel?" Matteo thought for a second. "Proud." Gabriel nodded. "Good." As they headed to the car, Matteo glanced at the medal in his hands. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about proving he belonged on that stage, that he could do this. And next time, he'd be stronger. Gabriel watched his son, seeing a new resilience in him. For the first time in years, he felt something beyond pride, something deeper. He'd spent so long chasing control, perfection, that he'd lost sight of what mattered, not the result, but the path. Matteo looked up. "Can I keep training?" Gabriel smiled, a rare, genuine one. "Of course. We're just getting started." One moment had changed everything for Gabriel Hart. Now, nothing would ever be the same. What would you have done in his shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you loved this story, hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell for more.